Have you ever found yourself in the midst of a rush hour on public transportation, packed like sardines, only to be met with the unmistakable scent of sweat from the person in front of you? Well, this situation can trigger irritation, especially when this person turns out to be a loudmouthed, antisocial asshole who is antisocial and arguing with a friend on speakerphone. And when someone calls him out, he just blurts out some cuss words and continues his disruptive behavior. We've all been there, encountering nasty people in the outside world, don't we? Assholes are everywhere. They're on the bus, on the train, on the streets, in restaurants, at work, in traffic, and even in our private spaces. These difficult individuals come from all corners of the world and all walks of life, just don't know how to behave. Or perhaps they do know but don't even bother doing so. So how do we deal with such people? It turns out that the ancient Stoics have some answers. Dealing with difficult people is a common theme in Stoic literature. They talked about deceptive brothers, bad fathers, individuals who pushed in public baths, and those who lacked manners and hygiene when using public facilities. So what can we do about loud and smelly commuters, unpleasant co-workers, or even abusive or narcissistic people we share our living spaces with? This video delves deeper into dealing with these difficult people, including those with hygiene issues, through the lens of Stoic philosophy and some relevant personal experiences. Don't miss the chance to apply Stoic principles to deal with life's adversities. Grab the Stoic Mindset ebook now and discover how to cultivate serenity in the midst of chaos, make wiser decisions, and overcome adversity with mental strength. Click on the link in the first pinned comment and embark on your journey of wisdom. After Epictetus was banished from Rome, he traveled to Nicopolis, a city in northern Greece, where he spent the rest of his life. In Nicopolis, he founded a philosophical school, and among his students was a young and bright man named Arrian. Without Arrian, we wouldn't have the esteemed teachings of Epictetus today, as Arrian wrote down a vast collection of lectures and created a pocketbook with his teacher's most important lessons. One of these lessons features a cornerstone of Roman civilization: bathing. Public bathhouses were prevalent in the Roman Empire, and the Roman bathing culture, based on that of the ancient Greeks, spread throughout the Mediterranean. Bathing was primarily a social practice. Romans visited the bathhouse to meet friends, invite them to parties, and politicians even used it as a place to collect support from the people. Even the super wealthy, who could afford private bathing spaces, frequented public baths due to their social aspects. These bathhouses provided citizens with a place to work out, socialize, relax, and have fun. However, as you might guess, with a wide variety of people visiting crowded public spaces, there was no shortage of those who splashed water intentionally, came to steal, or believed the bathhouse was their property, and behaved accordingly. Yes, reading Stoic texts, we can see that in many ways human nature hasn't changed much. And difficult people are a timeless occurrence. So what did Epictetus suggest regarding handling the difficult people of his time? Epictetus advised his students to remember the nature of their activities. Specific characteristics can be attributed to every action in the bathhouse. For example, there are things we can expect when we go there, even though we may not like them. People splashing water, pushing others, using abusive language, shouting, intimidating, or even doing a cannonball, if that was a thing back then. By being aware of these aspects inherent to the bath, we shouldn't be surprised when encountering them. So what should we do, according to Epictetus? He suggests that the focal point shouldn't be just bathing, but also keeping one's mind calm and under control. He said, "Thus you will more safely go about this action if you say to yourself, 'I will now go bathe and keep my own mind in a state conformable to nature,' and in the same manner with regard to every other action. For thus, if any hindrance arises in bathing, you will have it ready to say, 'It was not only to bathe that I desired, but to keep my mind in a state conformable to nature, and I will not keep it if I am bothered at things that happen.'" Similarly, We can apply this approach to taking public transport. What is the nature of this activity? Is taking public transport always quiet, with seats available for everyone, and with lovely and friendly people on the bus or train? Do trains always arrive on time without exception? Any commuter will probably admit that, even though positive experiences occur, they don't fully represent the nature of taking public transport. Instead, there are many unpleasant aspects, such as loud-mouthed, smelly, antisocial people who try to dodge fares, take up too much space, and put their phones on speaker mode in a fully packed subway car. So, what's the Stoic way of taking public transport? Based on Epictetus, the answer is twofold. First, before leaving, Stoics contemplate the nature of traveling with public transport. Second, Stoics focus on keeping their minds calm while partaking in the activity. When taking the bus, expect the possibility of delay, and when taking the train, expect to encounter unfriendly personnel and nasty passengers. Marcus Aurelius, considered one of the good emperors, was also a follower of the Stoic philosophical school. As an emperor, he had to deal with people all day, every day, including some pretty difficult ones. Some people were rude and demanding, while others were unfair and untrustworthy. Being an emperor was an enormous responsibility, and the burden was heavy. Just imagine being the most influential person alive, with many envious of you and trying to take your place, while a vast empire depends on your choices. Understandably, Marcus Aurelius sought an outlet for his thoughts, and this took the form of a diary in which he wrote his reflections. He wrote about fortitude in times of need, the meaning of life, the nature of being human, and unsurprisingly, about dealing with difficult people. Let's look at a curious example of Marcus Aurelius's writings, in which he urged himself not to be bothered by people's foul body odors. He stated, "Don't be irritated at people's smell or bad breath. What's the point with that mouth and those armpits? They're going to produce that odor, but they have a brain. Can they figure it out? Can they recognize the problem? So you have a brain as well. Good for you. Then use your logic to awaken his. Show him, make him realize it. If he'll listen, then you'll have solved the problem without anger." The underlying thought behind this approach is that we ultimately cannot control other people's behavior. Marcus Aurelius realized that even as an emperor, he didn't have complete power over his subjects. As we've likely experienced with people around us, they have their own brains, will, and freedom of action. If something bothers us about them, we can only point it out and state the issue clearly. But is that a guarantee that they'll listen? Chances are that they don't care about what we say. Some people may have hygiene issues and not care at all unless you can force them to take a bath and put on deodorant. Their hygiene is not in your power, and, as the Stoics would say, it's not worth worrying about. When people exhibit behaviors we don't like, we often scrutinize these behaviors closely. An example almost everyone can relate to is how we see our parents, especially as we grow older. We tend to focus on the negative characteristics of our parents, while overlooking the positive ones. Yes, some parents make terrible choices, some can't take criticism, and some are nosy. These facets can drive a wedge between us and them, but we can't simply disregard them because they persist in the background whenever we communicate with them. These characteristics are what make these people difficult, and unfortunately, there often isn't much we can do about them, as only they can decide to change. However, Epictetus urged us not to give up on these people just yet. The Stoic philosopher shares a lesson rooted in tolerance, showing that all things, including people, have more sides to them apart from their negative characteristics. Epictetus spoke to a pupil who struggled with a brother who acted unfairly, either with him or with others. He gave him the following suggestion: "Everything has two handles, one you can bear it with and one you can't. If your brother is unfair, and you try to grasp the situation by the handle of his unfairness, you're using the handle that won't work. Grasp the situation by the other handle, that he is your brother, and the two of you were reared together, and you can carry it well." In many cases, from personal experience, Changing perspectives goes a long way. Sometimes, especially when I'm alone with my thoughts, I find my mind magnifying people's negative sides, turning them into villains wreaking havoc on their surroundings. The handle, as Epictetus called it, becomes more significant than the person it's attached to. What helps is simply focusing on the other side of the person, as there's much more to someone than just being a jerk, a liar, an idiot, or a drama queen. There might be complementary aspects that could still support a bond, other handles to carry it with. However, the situation can be so bad at times that we cannot carry it even by the handles we consider acceptable. Some people are just too toxic to be around. If that's the case, keep watching. Imagine sharing your home with someone who starts a fire that produces smoke. As long as the fire is manageable and the smoke tolerable, you don't see a reason to leave. But what will you do when the smoke becomes unbearable? Will you stay inside or get out? Let me share something personal, something I've struggled with for a long time. I haven't spoken to a familiar for more than 5 years now. We used to be very close, but in the spring of 2018, I cut off contact for good reasons. It was an accumulation of experiences, some of which are quite disturbing when I recall them. This familiar exhibits the criteria of narcissistic personality disorder listed by the DSM-5, although it was never officially diagnosed because it doesn't believe it has a problem, in contrast to the world around it, of course. Regardless of what label might belong to this familiar, its complete disregard for personal boundaries, manipulation, pathological lying, self-aggrandizement, obsession with vengeance, and its path of self-destruction, not to mention the destruction of other people's lives, were too much for me to tolerate. I had to escape. The idea that this familiar is still my familiar, and therefore I should have it in my life, lost more and more of its credibility as incidents continued to pile up. And I wasn't the only victim. For years I contemplated the words of Epictetus. Are you naturally entitled then to a good father? No, only to a father. Although this familiar that I'm saying is not my father, the example of Epictetus' words is well placed. While that's true, I also had to recognize that there are limits to what one should bear. At some point, enough is enough. In the vast collection of recorded lectures by Epictetus called Discourses, he presents a simile about smoke in a house. It goes like this. As someone made a smoke in the house, if he has made a moderate amount of smoke, I shall stay. If too much, I go outside. This simile is generally explained as an argument that supports the idea of suicide, suggesting that when life becomes too burdensome, it's okay to leave. However, when we look at the passages preceding the simile, it seems that Epictetus is referring to difficult people, as they tell a story about someone not wanting to dine at someone's house because he cannot stand his boasting. Thus, Epictetus concluded, only do nothing as one burdened or afflicted, or thinking that he is in a wretched plight, for no one forces you to this. Here he seemed to emphasize our ability to choose when dealing with difficult people, or even full-blown narcissists. The question is there a possibility to leave? If the answer is yes, you can walk through that door and never look back at any time. When people have hurt us, we might entertain fantasies of revenge, and an eye for an eye may seem fair. If someone has harmed us or done an injustice, aren't we justified in giving them a taste of their own medicine? My dealings with my familiar evoked similar sentiments in me. For years I thought about revenge, about how I would settle the score. I certainly wouldn't use the same methods as him. My idea of revenge was success. As a kid, I was never good enough, always at fault, perpetually deficient. I figured that my best revenge would be to show it that I had achieved more success than he ever had. Although this form of revenge was constructive and not primarily aimed at harming someone, it was still revenge, still fueled by anger. So I sacrificed a part of my happiness to get back at it, which in retrospect was quite absurd. Not only did I keep my heart awake, but I also wasted my energy pursuing something ultimately out of my control, getting a reaction from my familiar. My desired reaction from it was a mixture of awe, recognition, regret, acceptance, and maybe, just maybe, an apology. But I realized it had probably never give me these things, no matter how much I accomplished. Epictetus presented a different outlook on the futility of revenge. In essence, he saw revenge as unnecessary and an act of harm to oneself. If we seek revenge because of an injury, something someone has done to us, let's first consider Epictetus's suggestion to think about what injury is. What is injury? When someone betrays you, are you injured? When someone chops off your hand, are you injured? By conventional standards, you would likely consider such events to be injuries. But Epictetus stated that actual injury entails a lack of morality in one's actions. Therefore, if someone lies to you or steals from you, that person has injured himself, as he has damaged his virtue, which is the true and only good according to the Stoics. Epictetus stated, "For if the good lies in moral purpose, and the evil likewise in moral purpose, see if what you are saying does not come to something like this. Well, what then, since so-and-so has injured himself by doing me some wrong, shall I not injure myself by doing him some wrong?" Revenge is sweet, so they say, and while this is true in some cases, the sweetness is often short-lived. Whether or not virtue is the only good is a topic for discussion, but in my opinion, Epictetus had a point when he said that by injuring the man who had hurt me, I would hurt myself. It's a different way of saying, never stoop down to their level. It's not worth it. Moreover, the intended injury may not even occur, as the suffering we hope to inflict ultimately depends on how they react to our actions, which is not in our control. So this is how Stoics deal with difficult people, including those who emit a bad smell. How do you deal with difficult people? Which Stoic suggestion do you like the most? Please let us know in the comments. Comment "Dare me" if you've watched until the end. Thank you for watching.